Hello and welcome to Mythmakers. Mythmakers is the podcast for fantasy fans and fantasy creators, brought to you by the Oxford Centre for Fantasy. My name is Julia Golding. I'm an author, but I also am the director of the centre. And I was thrilled looking through the upcoming publications and films to discover Carolyn Weber, who is our guest today. Because Carolyn has just put out a book and a film project called Surprised by Oxford. You couldn't really find anything more on brand than that. So Carolyn, tell us something about yourself.
Thank you so much, Julia, for having me here. Yes, I have an MPhil and a DPhil in romantic literature from Oxford, and did have a wonderful experience there. And I am currently a professor at New College Franklin. We moved recently to the Nashville, Tennessee area. And I do writing and speaking and teaching on faith and literature and the intersection of various genres in that way.
Now, I was particularly excited in a very personal way because the very course that you did was the one that I did. So picture me back in 1995. I just left the diplomatic service or took a break from it. I was having my first two children. And I embarked on the MPhil, the Masters of Philosophy in Romantic Literature, and which then did another few more years after that to do the DPhil. And I think you did exactly the same thing, didn't you?
I did, but without children at the time. So you were far braver than me.
Well, how it worked out for me is my daughter is my MPhil baby, and my middle child is my DPhil baby. And I do remember sitting in because part of the MPhil, as you remember, had written exams, my last experience of written exam. And my daughter had chicken pox. I was sitting in the hall thinking, I bet I'm the only person here who's actually rushed here from having put chamomile lotion on on a disagreeable baby.
You probably do have a hold on that corner.
Anyway, so, if you don't mind saying, when did you do your doctorate? Were you a little bit after me?
So I was a little bit before you for the MPhil. I came as a Commonwealth scholar a few years beforehand, and then I was married just shortly after the time you arrived, and had moved to DC for my husband's work and did the doctorate. The first year of the doctorate or so there, but then long distance for a few years after that. So I finished my doctorate a little later.
Yeah, that explains why we didn't actually meet at that stage.
Isn't that strange? I mean, we would have overlapped a little, I think.
So did you sit at the feet of Jonathan Wordsworth, for example?
I did.
Yeah. So there was, for those of you who recognize the surname, though, one of the academics at the time who has since passed away, sadly, was a relative of Jonathan Wordsworth, which kind of feels like the name of William Wordsworth. He was Jonathan, and his great uncle. So you feel as though somehow a surname has decided that chap's future.
Yes. It was a wonderful group that I had a great chance to study under.
Okay, so let's think about what we're interested in most is obviously your book and your film, Surprised by Oxford, nods towards C.S. Lewis's account of his early years. It finishes in the early 30s, doesn't it? Surprised by Joy. So tell us a little bit more about your connection to C.S. Lewis and your time in Oxford.
Well, it was interesting. I had arrived like most from mainstream culture. I knew the Narnia Chronicles as a child and had adored those, didn't think of them in any sort of deeper way. I did not know of Lewis as a lay theologian or really much as even a literary critic, especially coming from a larger secular undergraduate system. And so I was introduced to him through some friends when I was reading at Oxford, and I was actually dragged somewhat reluctantly myself to a C.S. Lewis Society meeting. thinking that it would be corny or, whatever. And I actually was really, really moved by it in Pusey Hall at the time. And it planted some seeds. So I ended up reading his Surprised by Joy much later in my life at that point. But I was intrigued because the title's from Wordsworth. And I was studying the Romantics. So I thought, okay, what's this about? But at that point, I ended up reading a few other of his works. Actually, one of the works I had read just prior to that, which whetted my appetite for him further, was Sheldon Vanauken's A Severe Mercy. And I was not a Christian at that point and had read that and knew that Vanauken had read and worked with Lewis as a student. So I was I started to become more intrigued by him through sort of that back door.
Yes, and if I remember the Severe Mercy, it's a very moving book. It's about the account of a man who loses his wife quite early on, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It is. It's a very, very poignant book.
Yeah, it mirrors the experience that Lewis went on to have, of course, when his wife, Joy Davidman, passed away from cancer too. So there's that sort of clicks into the grief observed side of C.S. Lewis.
Yes.
The problem of pain. So you pitch up in Oxford. You find that C.S. Lewis is connecting to Wordsworth. Thank you for reminding me of that. I did know that, but not active memory. So what did you think of Oxford in relationship to C.S. Lewis? Were you seeing him around every corner? Did you feel haunted in the nicest possible way by the Inklings?
Oh, I felt tremendously haunted by virtually everyone who's thought a thought beforehand when I arrived at Oxford, sort of feel it in the walls. But increasingly so. At first, no, I wasn't even aware of the Inklings until, again, being with friends and then going to the Eagle and Child or the Bird and Babe ourselves. And the same thing with Tolkien as well. I'd known, Hobbit, Lord of the Rings as a child, and I had a mother who was a voracious reader, and I was always really blessed by that, and somewhat sort of a very magical person herself. But I hadn't known any of his other works, or really had known of his ideologies or his friendships. I didn't know of Charles Williams, or his novels are a certain taste, and that sort of thing. So I didn't know the wider Inklings as a group in that sense. And so as I slowly began to then get introduced to George MacDonald and Chesterton, and that through and Sayers, through these really interesting friendships and their own coterie conversations, which I think as a romantic I was always drawn to because of their circles.
Yeah.
Then it just expands like roots in terms of connecting and reading other ideas that I was really intrigued by.
I mean, if you stopped any literary student of our kind and asked them name a famous literary group from the 1930s, people would say, oh, well, obviously the Bloomsbury Group.
The Bloomsbury. Mm-hmm.
Which is like Virginia Woolf and co. But if you say, well, actually, remember how that fabulously popular genre of fantasy was shaped by Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and much of and the friendships between Dorothy Sayers and T.S. Eliot and Charles Williams, you've got another group who don't really kind of make it onto the university syllabus, do they? So I'm not surprised you didn't know about them. And
they don't make it on the secular university, syllabus, or in many ways. And yet, when you find something like a treasure, like the Wade Center, with all the collection of the Inklings, and everything at Wheaton College, it's just a treasure trove of really rich ideas, regardless of your religious stripe.
Yeah, absolutely. And they were not the same kind of Christians at all to each other.
No, not at all.
Charles Williams was extraordinary with his with his sort of secret society interest. And then you get the sort of Northern Irish Protestant, then Anglican C.S. Lewis, and of course Catholic Tolkien. So within that, you got lots of flavors of your Christian ice cream, if you Okay, so what brought you to write the book, Surprised by Oxford?
Oh, that's such a big and deep and wonderful question. It was not something I intended to do. I set out to do at all, Julia. I was an academic and was used to writing, mainly researched work. but my experience there, especially over the course of my first year at Oxford, of reading these other thinkers and exploring a life of faith, and then eventually myself becoming a Christian, had really sort of been sitting in my heart and my head. And I certainly didn't proselytize to students. I was teaching at different types of universities, but in private conversations with students, or students who were asking or whatnot, my faith was a topic. And I also had felt that I really wanted to share the story and write more about it for my friends and family who did not have a faith or who had questions about it similarly to myself. So I wrote it really quite personally, in a sense, actually more for sort of me and God, and me and this audience of friends or family members and students who kept prompting and asking. And I had written a couple of chapters that were foremost in my mind at first, and then wrote a bit, tabled it, and did for some time. Largely, actually, at the time, I was untenured in the secular system, and was really warned not to publish something about my faith until I had some sort of job security, and even then, perhaps not. So there was that wrangling until something in my life really actually changed that and made me realize that where the line in the sand was for me, regardless. But it ended up being longer than I anticipated. I think as English lit people, we have a lot of words. But I also felt it was important to share post-conversion as well, what that was really like, kind of being in the world and not of it, that Heimlich and unheimlich sort of existence. And that it's, yes, it's an amazing experience and spiritually moving and deep, but there's also this reality of trying to now navigate a new world and a new way of being. And I wanted to share that as well. So I had actually ended up writing it over several years, but I ended up writing the rest of it quite quickly. You'll probably understand this, after I was on my first sabbatical, in Santa Barbara, when I was teaching as a guest lecturer or guest teacher for Westmont College. And I had 3 children under 3. So I had twins and my little girl, and that was the greatest sort of incentive for overcoming writer's block in terms of hiding and finally getting it done when I had moments, and it brought it together for me.
Yeah. So here's a sidebar for creatives here. When people ask me about writer's block, because I started my career when I was on maternity leave for my 3rd child, usually my first thought is, I didn't have time.
Right. Writer's block is a luxury.
Baby goes to sleep. Right. Quick.
Right.
Yes. And you pretend you don't hear the first cry, thinking, oh, you're going to go to sleep again, aren't you?
I know. I can write up until a certain volume.
Yeah, no. So, absolutely. So, just putting your book alongside Surprised by Joy, for those who are listening who perhaps can't remember the details of Surprised by Joy, he actually finishes the account when he sort of calls himself a deist. It finishes. It's not like a whole version of it. He sort of says that, and going further on was when I eventually became a Christian. He's actually more interested in his journey is having gone out of having a sort of childhood faith into a kind of atheism of the First World War, and as a young academic, and then having these conversations with Tolkien and others, Owen Barfield, that brought him back. So you're actually taking the journey further on as to, what ordinary life looks like beyond that. Did the choice of what you were studying in your romantic era, because I don't think I've asked you what your doctorate was about, did that have a connection to what you were thinking and feeling?
Oh, absolutely. And I wouldn't have guessed it at the time. I mean, I think we do go back and see how these points are plotted, but I was drawn to the Romantics because of their interest in that infinite longing. And, as we see even in German Romanticism too, and Goethe and whatnot. And so I was drawn to that overall out of all the periods I was studying at the time, coming out of undergraduate. And so I think that seed was already planted. I was also really interested, Julia, in world religions. So how religion was being shaped and whatnot in England and the Commonwealth by colonialism, but also in the infiltration of the Orient and ideas and things there. But how many of these, particularly second generation romantic writers, were writing abroad. They were not writing in England themselves or in Britain themselves. So being shaped by these ideas. And I was really drawn to myth and the Greco-classical world and really the notion of world religion. So that was actually really shaping my MPhil work. Prior to, even though it was rooted in the Romantics, I was sort of reading all around that. And I was actually drawn to the metaphysical poets as well. I was trying to figure out, even as without a Christian faith at the time, trying to figure out what sort of, subtle knot that makes us man Donne was talking about. And so I was really drawn to all sorts of theories and world religions and was studying all of those. And yet highly cynical of the claim Christianity made of being the religion. So yes, all of those things were feeding into my backdrop at the time.
Yeah. So if you're doing the second generation romantics, just for people who perhaps don't know, there's a difference. So the first generation, roughly speaking, they're Wordsworth and Coleridge, and William Blake, who's a kind of on his own figure. And sort of minor figures like Robert Southey and others. And then you've got the next generation coming along who think they're all hopelessly fuddy-duddy by the time they get there. And so you get the Byrons, Shelley, Keats, Hazlitt, people like that, who in their own ways are sort of quite more revolutionary. I mean, not so much Keats, because his life was so short, but but certainly Shelley was proudly declaring himself an atheist, so for his time. Their religion of the Romantics is absolutely fascinating and stormy waters, really, because it's part of the whole ferment of ideas that's going on there.
Absolutely.
So you wrote your book after having the prompting to do that, and I now got image of you sort of putting baby down, picking up computer. It was published, obviously. And where did the film project come from? That part of it.
Well,
latest iteration of this is via
Yes, it's much later. I mean, I certainly didn't see that coming either. I didn't anticipate writing a memoir nor a film, but several years ago, Suppressed by Oxford was published about 10 years ago or so. And here and there, I'd had different requests for documentaries or student adaptations or something to be done. There had been a few queries, and I hadn't really taken them seriously because I wanted to be very careful with the story and the integrity of the story. But Ryan Whitaker Smith reached out to me. He's a beautiful screenplay writer himself, and he's done some other film work whilst we were living in Canada. So we were out in the States for years, and then we had gone up to Canada for about the last 8 to 10 years, actually caring for my elderly parents at that time was the main reason. And he was quite doggedly so reaching out. At first, I thought this wasn't, going to be serious. And until my agent, Mark Sweeney, who's always cared for me and my family, very, 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 very lovely man, said, I think he's actually quite serious. I think he's actually really quite good. And so I did talk with him at length, and we developed a friendship, a relationship, discussing the possibility of adapting this to screenplay. So we were connected for several years by the phone and, email, that kind of thing. But it's an amazingly small world, Julia, in God's hands, because I ended up also working in classical education, going to conferences, things like that, with Greg Wilbur, who had ended up being he's a wonderful mentor in that area and had started this new college, Franklin, that I now teach at. And he had been a former professor for Ryan, and Ryan's one of his favorite teachers who had taught him about film. And so all of these intersections started happening. And and the film project became just more of a reality. We worked on the screenplay together. Then it was, we thought, halted and stopped by COVID.
Yeah.
As they were trying to get financial backing. And yet what was actually amazing was we ended up doing most of the filming in England during COVID. It actually, the doors opened for various locations and protocols and things that we would never have imagined. And I actually had even the amazing opportunity to go there myself, which was very, absolutely unbelievable given the timing of world events and things like that. So we actually did a bulk of the filming right between the variant, when it was resurfacing. So we had this strange window in which we were allowed to do scenes in the Bodleian and that sort of thing. And I was actually able to go with my husband. So it did percolate, I would say, over a good 5-6 years. Really, but when it and we expected the filming in that to maybe drag on or have many more hurdles, but actually it was all done quite quickly in the end. A bit like the motorcycle ride for Lewis to the zoo.
Yeah, that's when he decides he's going to become a Christian. I think it's in a sidecar or something, isn't it?
Yes, he's not one when he leaves, and he is when he arrives, and that's kind of how the last bit went.
Yeah. So, did you have any influence over casting? Because that surely must be peculiar, casting yourself.
It's very peculiar, and I feel very safe speaking, especially to a romanticist about this. It feels like a doppelganger, although a much more attractive and lovely doppelganger in my case. And my husband laughs that he has hair, but
so you had to cast yourself.
Yes, I didn't have any say in the casting. It's a strange experience because they consulted me on some things, which was really lovely. They didn't actually have to. You're sort of, when you're making a film of a book, it was an interesting learning curve. They did consult me on some things, but actually technically it's sort of an adaptation of its own. Yeah. So I was not consulted with the casting. I didn't have any say in that, but I thought that who they casted were fantastic. And I did get to meet many of them. Just Rose Reed, who plays myself, which is a really surreal, strange thing to say, is just a delight and a very talented actress and a very beautiful person. So that was a great honor to have her do that. But also I think it was, and she's a fellow bibliophile, but many of those decisions were out of my hands.
Yeah. And so you've now had the launch of the film, and what kind of distribution is it getting? Will I be able to go and see it, or is it for streaming?
Yes, well, we're still in process of thinking over that and trying to think the right, they're trying to figure out the best distribution plan. So it did have its world premiere to a limited audience for critics and whatnot at the Heartland Film Festival in Indianapolis a couple of weeks ago, and it did receive excellent reviews, which was really heartening. And the audience, again, regardless of religious stripes, enjoyed it, and there was great feedback. But at the moment, it's not available for public distribution. We're still awaiting what that plan will be. So they were hoping that would be decided or figured out before Christmas, but I don't think that will be quite enough time right now. So they're hoping for, I think, a hybrid model would be lovely to have some time in theaters and some streaming. The world has so shifted and changed, with COVID. Yeah. So we're still sitting on that at the moment. You can't watch it yet, but it hopefully will be distributed soon, probably early spring, I would imagine now.
So one of the reasons, Carolyn, I really wanted to talk to you from the point of view of the Oxford Centre for Fantasy is I wanted to ask you about your version of Oxford. Because one of the things that you soon sort of learn when you think about these writers and the way they interact with Oxford is that Oxford is a real place, but it also is a mythic place, and it appears in so many fantasy books. And I've got this sort of idea of it being like a palimpsest. You were saying hello to all sorts of people as you walk around, from the people way back in history like Friar Bacon and those kinds of, early scientific pioneers up to today's generation. So when you think about Oxford, are you sort of conscious of it being almost like a fantastical location for yourself, or? where's it fit?
Oh, that's such a lovely question. Such a lovely question. I, I mean, I think you probably experienced this as well. On one level, it's a very, very real place, with politics and pressures and a lot of expectations and work and delight and busy. Your term is incredibly whirlwindy, busy. I mean, I always think of the White Rabbit, in terms of how term functions. Yeah. But it also is haunted. It is a place that you can feel the history. I think everyone does. I think that's a magic that appeals to everyone in a way. The cinematography in this film is beautiful. They did a lovely job, which is why it really lends itself to the big screen. But there is something I think that speaks to all of us in ruins, or in old places that carry many stories. A palimpsest is a great example. When you're there, you feel the history, you feel the thoughts, you feel the suffering, you feel what has happened there. It's contained in that. That's part of the mystique of a place like England as well, but also of particularly Oxford, because you feel the concentration of history and of thought, don't you? Yeah. And so they decided in the film to really highlight the sort of magical fairy realm feel of it, as through my eyes, which I did feel, but in tandem with this student life and this busy life, and then later this life of being employed there too. But you do feel like you're on the shore of something, that any moment it could tip, or that you're somehow in this liminal space between the two worlds. I mean, you do look at the portals going into the colleges, and they do open into these vast, gorgeous, beautiful gardens, and you can't help but think of Narnia, right? They are like wardrobe doors. They are like, it is interesting to have this very busy, bustling city and the town gown dichotomy, and yet you can walk a few feet and be entirely in perfect peace.
Yeah, I mean, I did my undergraduate at Cambridge,
right,
which I'm very fond of. And the thing about Cambridge is that its beauty is there exposed to sea, because the way it works with the river is you can walk, as a member of the public, you can walk along the backs, and you see a whole range of most incredible, beautiful buildings. So the beauty of the university is on the outside, visible. The thing about Oxford is it's full of secrets. Yes. Full of doorways, and you can't really see how beautiful each of the colleges are until you actually go in. Right. And so my interaction with Oxford has been I had my academic phase, but I've also worked there and raised a family there. So I'm very town. Right. I'm not much town anymore. And still for me, I can sort of go into I went to a friend's wedding anniversary in a college, and you go into the Unitarian chapel and find amazing windows by William Morris and I think it's Burne-Jones. You think, well, if there's any other city, this would be on the map, right? as a thing to go and see. It took me about 25 years to know it was there. There it was. And then for lockdown as well, we during the phase when we were only allowed to walk from the door for a certain length of time under the regulations, we started exploring the bits on the map we'd never been, and discovered a whole series of wonderful walks right in the heart of the city. Absolutely. Down a place called Music Meadow, which in itself sounds storybook. It does. It's you're on the Charwell River with an old mill and bluebells and birds and trees, and you are literally in the heart of the city. You go deeper into the city, and this little natural enclave is there. Again, it took us 25 years to find that. Thank you. So I agree with you that I think Oxford is a place of doorways. And of course, the biggest of the fantasy writers for doorways, I think, but an Oxford one is Lewis Carroll. Yes, absolutely. That image of the tiny door you can't get through, and then you forget to get the key when you eat the cake, right? That situation. Sums up that sort of being on the wrong side of the door thing. Yes, Oxford definitely does reward the seeker, and it does remind you that things, not everything's seen. There's the unseen as well, and so that it is very, there is a magic to it that's very real.
in that sense.
Yes, but also the danger is you romanticize it because there is some cutthroat
Absolutely
stuff going on. So it's probably quite a good counterbalance that one of the most famous television programs here about Oxford is Inspector Morse, where people are dropping like flies.
Right.
Murders in every quad. So, and Dorothy L. Sayers, of course, is famous for her crime fiction. So we also spawn, a lot of violence too.
Oh, yes. Yes. And it's a fallen city like anywhere else. There's people and human interactions and lots of political.
But it's not as dangerous as it's made out in crime fiction,
No.
It's actually a very safe city, really.
It is overall. Yeah, I think so.
So moving away from Surprised by Oxford to your specialism in the Romantic era, this is one of the great periods for fantasy, though people perhaps don't associate it with that because we call it Gothic fiction. Mm-hmm. And we call it the collectors of fairy tales and folk tales, like the Brothers Grimm, but also, of course, the poets were doing this too, the Romantic poets. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it is very ripe. Some of the sort of tropes for fairy tales came into our European consciousness at this point.
Yes.
And Robert Southey is credited for being the first person to write down Goldilocks. I don't know if that's true or not.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Strange fact. I remember thinking that's weird.
You know what? I think I do recall that because of his relationship with Coleridge's children, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. That's right.
So, Carolyn, do you have a favourite Romantic era fantasy story or poem that we should try to read?
Oh, there are so many, and it's such a wonderful, dense time, and I'm drawn to Scottish nationalism in that as well. I think it's really interesting in terms of the folk stories there. But off the top of my head, I think one of the most important and beautiful to read is Coleridge's Ancient Mariner.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Have you read the wonderful Malcolm Guite? Yes. So people who want to read a wonderful biography of Coleridge plus an explanation of the Ancient Mariner, Malcolm Guite, who is also a Tolkien expert, has written a wonderful book based on it. Yeah, I agree. Though I think Kubla Khan, you just have to read for the sounds as well.
You do. You just have to read it as T.S. Eliot says, right? That a poem is an event. You have to read it to experience it, and yet its ending is really much that magical realm. But I think Ancient Mariner, the ballad rhyme scheme, the story development, the enter into another world that's in many ways our psycho-spiritual landscape, actually, that journey into the interior, again, to think about Margaret Atwood and her poem by that name. But it's such a it's such a beautiful, rich, otherworldly experience, I think.
Perhaps we should get you back, Carolyn, to talk about Coleridge, because I haven't yet done a podcast on him, but he, of course, the Romantic writers and fantasy is definitely a podcast we should do.
Oh, that'd be fun.
So just to finish up, we always have where in all the fantasy worlds is the best place for something. We've done inns and magic swords and so on and so on. As we have both done academic things with small children, rugrats at our knees, I thought I'd ask you, where in all the fantasy worlds is it the best place to be a parent? Very often in fantasy worlds, the parents are gotten rid of. So,
yes, that's true.
But where is a good place to be a parent?
Well, I think obviously Rivendell would be a great place to be a parent.
Unless you have to leave your daughter behind as you go buying lands. I mean,
That's true. But I do think somewhere where there is immense natural beauty and you could trust the trees to care for your child while you have a nap. And, and there's nothing threatening because, of course, we as parents see everything as threatening.
Yeah.
The landscape changes for us and our mortality looms, the moment we have children.
I was thinking of, I went through a whole range of horror stories when I was thinking about this. But if you manage to survive and your children don't get bumped off, with the setup of being a Weasley in
Yes,
seems, that's a family group
yes.
together in Harry Potter.
I have many students who've wanted to be a Weasley, and Mark Williams is actually in the film.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes, he is.
Oh,
yes.
Well, there we go. So that's brought the conversation to a lovely meeting point. So I would, in times of peace, minus Voldemort, I would like to be in the world of Harry Potter. As a parent. So thank you so much for talking to us, Carolyn. And it's been wonderful talking to you. And I look forward to seeing the film when it does get its wider distribution.
Thank you so much, Julia. It's a delight to have talked here with you today, too. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Mythmakers Podcast, brought to you by the Oxford Centre for Fantasy. Visit oxfordcenterforfantasy.org to join in the fun. Find out about our online courses, in-person stays in Oxford, plus visit our shop for great gifts. Tell a friend and subscribe wherever you find your favourite podcasts worldwide.